Anyone who's ever done anything worth doing has dreamed big, failed mightily, and mostly started from humble beginnings. This is a podcast about such people. The most fascinating podcast in the world is fascinating because of the stories of the human beings. Hello, everybody. It's Pat DeCerbo, the most fascinating podcast in the world. Has nothing to do with me, and if you don't believe me, you can ask my wife. It has everything to do with the people that agree to come on the show. And today we have someone who is super fascinating. His name is John Robinson. And in addition to all the other fascinating things about him, he has the distinction with his wife, Andrea, of being the first husband and wife team that I've interviewed. I interviewed Andrea about her hiking and her life. I met her in an airport in Las Vegas, and she said, even though John denies this, she said that her husband is even more fascinating than she is. And if I want to talk to someone fascinating, I should talk to him. So I told him, and he said I was full of shit. So I guess we have to have her on again to figure it out. But welcome, John. It's nice to see you.
Thank you, Pat. Yeah, I still don't know if I believe she said those words, but I'll bring it up at the dinner table this week and see what happens publicly.
I may have misquoted her. I've been known to do that. Some people call me a raconteur.
No,
You know what I mean?
think she's my biggest advocate external of the house. There's no doubt about that part of it.
But she doesn't want you to get spoiled at home.
I'm still a husband. I'm still a husband.
She doesn't want you to get soft.
That's
So,
right.
as you know, I'm in the habit of asking people about their earliest memories. But before we talk about that and the rest of your life, for people that are watching and listening, could you tell everyone a little bit about your circumstances physiologically?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really don't hide from this part of it. It's part of being a public person with a physical disability. And truthfully, physical disability, people always decide when they self-disclose and what they self-disclose. And in my case, it's obvious I'm disabled if you see me. I'm a quadruple congenital amputee. Congenital amputee means I was born with an amputation. Quadruple means 4. So all 4 of my limbs are affected by amputation at birth. My arms are your upper part of your arm. So no elbow, no forearm, no hand, no wrist, no fingers. And my legs are the lower part of your leg. And instead of a knee and upper part and hip ball and joint like you might see in an x-ray, the bone in my leg rides up into my pelvis area with really nothing holding it together except muscle. So there's no ball and joint. And that's good and bad. The good is that I'm not going to have the bone on bone wear and tear with hips that a lot of people do. The bad is if it ever rips, they won't know how to fix it other than putting a ball and joint in there, and that means that I'm going to have to relearn to walk. So, I do have a different physiology, and I know that, and I'm certainly aware of it as I navigate the universe and engage with the physical environment around me, whether it's desks or computers or cars or what have you. But I think you notice it more. Certainly, you notice it more when you see me. But then you'll notice it more when you watch other people see me, right? And that's one of the biggest learnings that I've had in my experience, that I can ignore it to some degree because people stare at me all the time. I think those around me can't ignore it as much because they, if you're a best friend of mine and you see me 5 times a year, great. It's those 5 times a year that you notice other people staring at me, and then when you separate from me, you don't think about that. So there's no doubt that being an amputee has presented a challenge. Being a quadruple amputee definitely is different. And, I stand 3'8" now at 57 years old. I'm shorter. I'm navigating a world that's built for people that are 5'5" and up, and I'm not that, right? So that's a big part of my experience.
And we talked a little bit about your earliest memories before we started on air. What do you remember from when you were a small child?
Hey, Pat, I thought a lot about that because it's funny. Do you remember things because there were photos of them when you were young, or do you actually remember moments? there's a couple of things that I really do think about in my youth. One is that I spent my summers on my grandparents' dairy farm in Lafayette, New York. Uh, and my uncle and my aunt were there, and their experience. My mom was the oldest of three children, so I got to I got to sort of spend time on the farm, and then spend really good solid time with my grandparents. And I was the oldest of all the grandchildren, so that was a really big blessing for me. My grandfather, dairy farmer, worked every day of his life, physical work, hard work. Don't grow up to be a dairy farmer, because it's taxing. There's no doubt. But for me, as a 5, 6, 7-year-old kid, got to jump in the truck, ride in the wagon of the tractor, um, you know, spend time with him in a way that not a lot of people get to spend time with their grandparents at their work setting. I love that, and think fondly about that. My grandmother, matriarch of the family, was truly in charge of everybody, and we all sort of followed along with it. My grandmother was a guiding force in my life, even into adulthood. I mean, it was really important for Andrea to meet my grandmother, for my grandmother to approve of my wife, maybe more than my parents. And then ultimately, Andrea and I lived with my grandmother on the dairy farm for 3 years while we got economically on our feet. So I think back to being a child. Even if I step on the dairy farm now, I'm a child, hitting a tennis ball with a baseball bat, or my grandfather building me a 3-hole golf course with margarine cups in the yard, mowing down the yards for sort of a green, and learning how to play golf. That's one side of it. And then the other side of it is, my dad was an Episcopal priest, and we were in Greene, New York until I was in 7th grade, and then Manchester, New Hampshire. And the thing about being a child of a priest was that holidays became really important. They become important liturgically, obviously, but they become important for his work, and then for the surrounding community that he was, uh, sort of shepherding, and then our family, right? And so I can think back to Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter dinners, that the family would come to Greene, and that we would be the sort of the hub of the universe. And I think very fondly about that. As a matter of fact, my mom really loved Christmas, and so having the house decorated, going to church, midnight mass, being the preacher's wife, and then having family there for big dinner the next day, presents, just great memories. And so I think very fondly back to that. And I can go back Thanksgivings and Christmases 5, 6, 7 years old and remember that. Reason Thanksgiving is memorable is because my birthday is December 1st. And so my mom would always celebrate my birthday on Thanksgiving, and the family was there. So I can remember that. One of the first gifts I got was the beginnings of an electric train set that my uncle started. He had an electric train set when he grew up. He was born in 1944. So I can remember looking at his train set when I was 5 years old, and then he started me on that journey. And so I think about those Thanksgivings and Christmas dinners where he'd bring a new train set piece. And that really is some amazing memories for me to go back and think about that. Now, I've got three adult children. Andrea and I have three adult children. And, they always laugh at me because Christmas is really that important. Part of it is because I'm in my head as 5, 6, 7-year-old, listening to church music, thinking about, my dad running the midnight mass, and the preparation of the music and the liturgy before that. And so I'm in my head, and I'm that age again. And so, those are the two tracks of youthful memories that really are wonderful to be able to re-experience in your memory. I advocate that if you've got those wonderful experiences, it really can ground you as to who you are then, who you were then, and who you are today.
Mm. And we talked at length not long ago, and I asked you about your circumstances, sort of when you were a little kid, and against the backdrop of society, when you were born, what it was what it was like then? And what if you were born 50 years prior or 100 years prior?
Yeah.
How do you think about such things?
It's a complicated thought process. I think it's easy for me at my age now to do it. Um, but part of that is the foundation I'm sure that my parents built on me. Um, my dad would say that I was a happy baby coming out. And I don't know. I was there, but I certainly wasn't paying attention. And so I probably was. I don't think about too many negative thoughts growing up. I mean, certainly when people stare at you and people deal with you and you start to get discriminated against, it's going to start chipping into you, right? But I really kind of was a happy, contented young person. I had good friends all along, had things that I liked to do. We lived in a small community in Green of 1,600 people. So I got to experience quite a bit. And so, nature, nurture, right? I think my nature part of it was I was relatively content. Um, Nurture is my parents built upon it. As you grow up, and you start to get discriminated against. And the truth is, I did quite heavily, from public schools that didn't want me to um, having had to go to a private school because the public school in New Hampshire didn't want me, to being unemployed for 4.5 years after Syracuse University. That I've had those moments, and I've experienced that. But I do have somewhat of a perspective on where I am in the continuum of people with disabilities in society. And something I shared with you when we were sitting down, but something I definitely think about and say when I speak to groups of either people with disabilities, their family members, or the business community. And that is that I'm in an interesting position in time. I was born in 1968 as a quadruple congenital amputee. Um, when I was born, my parents didn't know that I was going to be disabled. Complete shock to my mom. She had to work through that. I smiled at my dad, so I got one of the two parents to keep me, and then I smiled at my mom, and she became a force of nature on my behalf, right? And so um, that was an interesting perspective to think back now, because you think about our three children. We had scans. We could see the skeleton structure. You didn't have that in 1968. Um, I went to kindergarten around 1973 when the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, it was a different name at the time that was offensive, but that's what it is, IDEA, was signed, which meant that by law I needed a fair and appropriate public education. So my kindergarten experience started with that. I graduated Syracuse in 1990 with a degree in television, radio, film, when the ADA was signed. So in theory, there should be no discrimination. So I started at the beginning of all of these things. And so my journey was bumpier because it was at the beginnings of it. And there was a period of time, Pat, where I thought, what was me about that? But the truth is, I was probably better equipped to be able to deal with that. And I learned really early on that I was pretty darn lucky. I spent the COVID years doing my master's in disability studies. And maybe it seems different for a person with a disability that's had a disability business to go back and study disability studies. But I really wanted to look up and think about eugenics. And I wanted to look up and think about advocacy as a paradigm. And as I was doing those readings in the COVID years and getting my master's, and I started to put all the pieces together. And the pieces are this: that if I had been born in 1958, not 1968, I was probably institutionalized. And you don't have to go back too far to see the Geraldo Rivera piece on Willowbrook. Institutionalization would have been devastating to me. I'd be dead now. I mean, I just physically wouldn't have gotten any care, any happiness in life, any physical outlet, any of the things that I love, any friendships. Um, you know, 10 years earlier, I'm in an institution. 100 years earlier, 1868, as the oldest grandchild on that dairy farm, the reality is I was probably drowned in the swamp in the back because I was a mouth to feed and not somebody that could work physically. Not dissimilar to if a calf is born that way or a horse is born that way, right? So I realized that, and I'm not blaming anybody for that either. I'm just understanding humanity and understanding my place in it to a small degree. And, if I have dark times, and I do, I mean, I'm a small business owner in upstate New York, running a business that helps people with disabilities in a time where our federal administration wants nothing to do with people with disabilities. So I've got those moments, but, I'm still lucky to be here, and I haven't lost that perspective yet.
Hmm. So you're a young child in Green. How long did you live there? I forget.
About 11 years. So I was in seventh grade.
And then where did you go?
We moved to Manchester, New Hampshire. My father took the job at the biggest Episcopal church in the state of New Hampshire, which was in downtown Manchester.
Mm-hmm.
So we moved from 1,600 people to 100,000 people. So a little bit different than I was used to before.
Mm-hmm. So you were 11 at the time? Is that how old you were? Okay.
Yeah, 11 just turned 12.
And at that point, like from the standpoint of independence, like were you independent? Like could you dress yourself and stuff like that, or did you need assistance?
That's a great question. Dressing became a real journey in my teenage years. Up until that point, my dad, my mom were helping me get dressed and undressed. I was pretty good with hygiene. My parents had a bidet. Bidets are bidets are things that are making a comeback now, which is kind of funny. All of my college roommates now are proud that they have a bidet because they they watched me and deal with it in college. Um, but I had a bidet early on. That helped with hygiene. I could brush my teeth. I could shower. I could soap. I could, do all the hygienic things I needed to do, which was somewhat of a miracle, truthfully. But dressing was hard because laces, buttons, buckles, uh, you know, anything with a tie became hard, right? My arms will go to my waist, but it's really hard for me to have the dexterity to be able to get to the waist or even to a button. So I really had to go on a journey. My parents helped me get dressed through most of the high school years, but I learned pretty early on that a couple of things. One, I could use a walking cane, a wooden walking cane, which I have all over the house now, to pull my pants up and down, to put my socks on. So I really taught myself how to do that. I didn't really have any occupational therapy on that. There was some occupational therapy as a kid, but it wasn't the way I am now. It was as if I was using prosthetics. So I really had to navigate it. And so I used a walking cane to dress,
You taught
uh,
yourself to dress?
taught myself. And then I had to figure out buttons. So got a button hooker. Then I had to figure out how to do the button on your pants. And so my mom had a really good friend that was a seamstress. And their idea initially was to take the button off of the jeans and put a little square patch of Velcro there, but that wasn't strong enough. And so then they ended up, we all three of us, my mom and the seamstress and I, we decided to do about a 6-inch strip of Velcro and put a loop on it and pull the loop through the buttonhole and sort of pull it up against the other 6-inch strap. So even today on the jeans I'm wearing now, there's a 6-inch strap of Velcro going through the buttonhole. And
Hmm.
it was something that we invented for me when I was in high school. Then I had to figure out how to zip up my zipper, and that was really the biggest frustrating thing. So about that same time, my mom had the curtains down in the dining room to be washed, and I went into the dining room and grabbed a curtain rod because it was a little bit smaller, it had a little bit of a curve, and I could grab it. And so I grabbed the curtain rod, ran upstairs in the bedroom, and shut the door. And God alone knows what she thought I was doing. And I was really trying to figure out, could I use the end of the curtain rod to pull up my zipper? And I do that today. So that's how I do it at 57 years old. I've got the same darn curtain rod since I was 16, held
You
together by.
haven't worn it out yet?
No, and Tad, I'll tell you what, if it breaks, I'm doomed. I'm going to have to find.
We got to go on eBay and get you a new one.
Well, and I'm gonna have to find a welder to reinforce it because my cousin put a metal strip down the middle to make it stronger, and it's a process. But the truth is, I really had to teach myself all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And even today, to get dressed like I am today without my shirt tucked in, but jeans on and socks on, it's 20 minutes.
Mm.
If I'm tucking in my shirt, it's another 10 minutes.
Mm.
trying to poke my cane down the back of my pants to push the shirt down. If it's a necktie, it's another 15 minutes on top of that. I can
Mm.
do it, but it's a journey, and I think I've lost perspective in some ways about how much self training I had to go through, and I really did truly try to problem solve my dressing. And even now, I learned how to tie shoes watching other people, and I taught my 3 children how to tie their shoes. And they all kind of laugh about it now, but I did. I mean, I was the one to say, here's what you do. I may not be able to do it, but I can navigate you so you learn how to do it. And they did. So that's just a it's been a life journey on problem solving, really, more than anything else.
It's fascinating. And your dexterity, just drinking out of the cup like you are now. And when I saw you at Starbucks with a coffee cup, and and I think you pointed it out. You're like, everyone always wants to help me. They don't realize I can do it myself. I can get in and out of a door and so on and so forth. Do you have
Yeah,
any strong feelings about that? Like, is it offensive for you when people want to assist you? Or
only if I'm in a bad mood.
mm.
No, listen, people. I also have to realize people don't run across me every day.
Hmm.
So, and if honestly, Pat, if somebody, I'm looking out at my front yard, if somebody walked down the street that was a quad amputee, I'd be staring at it, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I think there is a assistance or help. There's a balance. There's a balance within me, and there's a balance within society. I if somebody offers to help, I'll thank you, but I'm good. If I am good, and if I need it, I'll say so. And then the balance in my head is, do I really need it, or can I do it on my own, or am I just making life easier? If I can do it on my own, I tend to do it on my own. Um, then there's the other side of it is if I do need help, that Starbucks that we had coffee at, if I couldn't reach something, I would have been more than happy to ask you to help me reach it. So there's that balance, and years and years I would do the grocery shopping, and usually the kids would grocery shop with me so they could do the reaching. But if I was by myself, then I would ask people, can you grab the spaghetti sauce? And that, you know, I'm not, I don't love doing it, but I'm not opposed to doing it if it's necessary. But invariably, somebody will come up in the grocery store and ask me, "Can I do this for you?" And if I don't need it, I'll say thank you, but I've got it. And I think it's good. People ask. It's good when they listen, and that's I've had both sides of it where people don't ask and people don't listen; they just do. That it's not as often, but it certainly has happened.
Hmm. It's funny because not that I'm the politest person in the world, but I'm in the habit of holding doors for people, men or women. It doesn't.
Yeah,
And nobody asked me to. And so it wouldn't be out of character for me one way or the other to to hold the door for you,
yeah.
but if
That's
it's
I think that's just a nicety, right?
okay.
I hold the door for people. I mean, that's just boy,
Hmm.
that's a lost art too. I mean, we don't. It's part of being present to somebody that you're with, right? And even somebody walking the door that you don't know, hold the door for them.
Right.
But there are instances that if I've got my backpack on or I'm busy, it's definitely easier, and I appreciate that, and I do my best to say thank you and recognize that.
That would be in the category of common courtesy, which is not so common.
No,
So you're in Manchester, and I think you told me a story about going to high school there. Is that right? Was that when they said you couldn't go to high school there?
yeah. So I think one of the first things my parents did was figure out what school system we would be in, and at the time I was wearing prosthetics, arms and legs, when I was at school, and so stairs were difficult. Now, I could walk, but hard to navigate. And so when my parents moved to Manchester, they met with the Central School District in Manchester, which was the junior high and high school system I was going to be in. And the Manchester Central School District did not want me to go to public school. And so they really pushed back on my parents on that. Now, I joke about that a little bit because the motto in New Hampshire is live free or die. And in, growing up in the 80s in New Hampshire, it was pretty much that. It was live free or die. I mean, they're a very libertarian state. They don't like being told what to do. I don't think many of us do come down when it comes to our nature. But that also included some laws, and so that was one of the laws that they pushed back on. And so my parents and the elders of the church fought them, and really in a 5-day period, they came to an agreement that the school district would pay for me to go to a different school and not go to the public school system. And that different school was a really uh, well-known prep school in Manchester. And so I actually ended up going to a school closer to my house that gave me a fantastic education in a smaller school setting environment. And so I made out great. I really did. I got a great education, going to Derryfield. And, I also lost something, and that was I lost the fact that I wasn't with 400 kids, and I wasn't at the big football game on Friday night. And I didn't volunteer with the hockey team in the high school because at Derryfield, we were a small prep school. They played soccer. They had a small basketball team. And so I didn't get some of those things that I would have wanted, but I really absolutely 100% benefited from that education. And so if I look back on it now, the trepidation that the Manchester City School District had about either my parents suing them if I got hurt, or they couldn't accommodate going up and down stairs or carrying books or whatever it was that they were worried about. The trade-off is I made out great, and I know that now, and I certainly appreciate that. It's one of those moments in your life where something happens to you and it really is for the better. You just don't see it till it's down the road.
So you graduated high school, and what did you do after that?
So I went to Syracuse University. I went to study television, radio, film. I did that because my vocational rehabilitation counselor asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I said I wanted to be involved in sports in some way, and so they really helped me on the path to go to Syracuse's communication school. It was good for me because that's really where the dairy farm was. So I was about 10 minutes away from where I'd spent my summer, so I was very comfortable in central New York. And I grew up a Syracuse fan, so I watched the basketball and watched the football teams as a kid. So that was great. It was also great going to university, being away from a small high school where you've got 40 brothers and sisters for 6 years, into, okay, I'm one of 1,600 freshmen, 2,000 freshmen. I don't have to know somebody if I don't want to. And they don't have to like me if they don't want to. And so it really taught me how to navigate people that didn't need to deal with you as a person with a disability. I really learned on how to be not the disabled classmate, but just the classmate, even though I was in the disabled body. And I say it like that because I really had to learn to be a friend. And that was something I had really close friends in high school, but when you're forced to be with 40 people forever, you'll find somebody you can hang out with. But when you're around 2,000 people, you'll either find your people or you won't. And I really wanted to find my people. And so I ultimately did. And that was a great thing. And I think my friends raised me as much as anybody else. I say that now when I give talks. I think people think it's an offensive comment to my parents. It absolutely is not. I think your friends do more for you than people realize. And I learned more about myself and who I really am in the push and pull of building lifelong friendships. And even today, those college guys that I became great friends with, we still talk via text every day, all day long. And that is something I am truly grateful for.
So did you have like a normal dorm experience at Syracuse? Like did they have was it special needs accessible and
Yeah,
stuff like
it was sort of a little bit of both.
that?
I that when I was accepted to Syracuse, they they really wanted to make sure that I got my own bathroom for the bidet, truthfully.
Mm.
And so, because you know how college, even if it had been in the normal bathroom, somebody would have broken it, right? So I get that. So I had one of the 4 dorm rooms with a bathroom in it on the campus, which was, if you think about such a big campus, that was pretty cool. I had a roommate. We arrived pretty much the same time. 2 weeks into my freshman year, he left. He said he couldn't stand looking at me and he was going to leave, and so that was fine. I mean, whatever. And that was also in a way that was really good, because when that person left the dorm, I almost named him. When that person left my dorm room, the university let me have a single then for the next year and a half. So I didn't have another, quote, inside my dorm room roommate. It wasn't until we moved and rented a house that, we lived together 18 months later. But I did forge friends, and having my own room then allowed me to welcome in who I wanted or didn't want. I got cable TV, and so then the guys on my floor mates who became great friends, we'd watch baseball, we'd watch the basketball games, right? So, again, it's one of those things, in the moment you don't think it's a great thing when your roommate leaves you, says he can't look at you, but the truth is, having my own room, my own bathroom, it became a sort of a common area for people to meet and hang out, and that was really good for all of us to have kind of that space and that connection.
And the guy that was your roommate that left and said that, he stayed in school?
I saw him. I saw him once on campus. I don't know. I really don't know whatever ended up happening to him.
Got it. So, what do you remember from college? Were there any professors that impacted you that you think of today, or any experiences that were formative that?
Yeah, I had some really good teachers, professors. There's an economic professor that used to make me laugh, and so I took his classes. Everything in economics for this professor was Dos Equis beer. So, and 1988. I don't even know if Dos Equis was really that big, but he must have traveled Central America. So every supply and demand graph was about that. And then as I took his other classes, I realized he's really extremely intelligent. He was just trying to figure a way to connect with freshman students. He really got me interested in economics, and it wasn't my major. It was my minor, but I took as many economics classes as I did communications classes. I loved it. I took the public policy class by William Copeland, who was pretty famous at the time, and I took 2 of his classes. He was a ham. So that was interesting. Communications wise, yeah, I had really 3 really good professors. Rick Wright was a very famous broadcasting professor at Syracuse University, and I took 2 of his classes. I didn't go into broadcasting per se. I was on the business side of it, but I enjoyed those a lot. And then I had 2 professors, Martin and Gilbert. Martin was really kind to me and really took me under his wing to make sure I was doing the right thing sort of internally. And Professor Gilbert was a real hard, he was a hard ass. But I took 2 of his classes too, and he would give you 80 to 100-page projects to do. And at the time in the 80s, I mean, we had a word processor, but it was just that. It wasn't, like Word where you can save things really easily. What he really taught us to do was to work. And, prep school did that to me too. Prep school would give me, 5-6 hours of homework a night. And really what it was an exercise in learning what you have to get done and what you can get away with not getting done. And even I went back to the prep school years later and met the teachers that were my teachers when I was an adult. And they said that. They said, what we really were doing was overloading people so they could figure out how to problem solve. I realized that with Professor Gilbert at Newhouse, that it was that. an 80-page project on Cruncheroo potato chips where you got to create a marketing plan and a buying plan and what audiences you're gonna sell your Cruncheroo potato chips to was really just an exercise in overload of information and see how you can process and synthesize in a communications world, Madison Avenue type environment, so that when you're working at a TV station, you're thinking on that side of it as you're selling advertising. It was really an interesting perspective, and I've gone back to that more than I thought I would in my 16 years of working at television. That understanding of, okay, I'm a business, I'm your local Honda dealer. What am I looking for? Well, you're looking for Honda buyers. Well, who are Honda buyers? So if I'm selling advertising at Channel 13 in Albany, I need to have that perspective on the business side. Those two communications professors really got me where I wanted to be, and I appreciated that.
Mm. So you graduated college. You had great professors, great friends. Then what did you do?
Then I struggled.
Mm.
I Pat, there were 8 of us that lived together the last 2 years, pretty much, and 4 of us were in the same program. And upon graduation, 3 of the 4 of us got jobs right away, and I didn't. It's 1990. Like I said before, the ADA is signed. I interviewed with TV stations all over the Northeast. I interviewed with CBS and Turner Turner Broadcasting, their parent company at the time. I interviewed with CBC in Toronto, Ontario. I really wanted to get into ratings. Part of that marketing exercise was understanding the audience. And I loved the rating conversation in television, the Nielsen books, the demographics, the psychographics. I really loved that stuff. I interned at a TV station in Boston in ratings and research. And the research manager, I can hear her right now saying to me, if you go into sales, you never come out. You'll make too much money, and you're going to want to be involved in sales. And when I did ultimately get my first job, she was right. I stayed in sales, but I was successful in sales in part because I understood the audience, and I did that because I paid attention in college and really loved that part of it. But I interviewed with everybody, and the truth was that 3'8", limited arms and legs, not wearing a 3-piece suit in 1992 hurt me. And I probably hurt myself with it too. I mean, you get told no enough times with enough pressure on you, you're gonna compound that pressure. And so that was me. I had 25-second interviews in person with multiple TV stations, and got sick of hearing the word no. So in that process, took a lot of sort of side part-time jobs. I was a newspaper stringer for the sports section in the Concord Monitor, Concord, New Hampshire newspaper. Loved it, but realized I wasn't going to make any money as a stringer. Loved that very much. Clean swimming pools. Interviewed with a job in Toronto, Ontario in 1991 to what I was told would be a fundraising group that would help fundraise for arts organizations in North America. One of the arts organizations that they said they worked with was public broadcasting. So I saw it as a possibility of getting into PBS in a roundabout way. So I was offered a job. It was a trial period. So I put my futon and my stereo in the backseat of my car and drove to Toronto. Rented a room from an actor. I found the actor through Syracuse University because he graduated Syracuse 2 years before. So I rented a room in downtown Toronto to see if I could work on this job. And the first day I pulled into the driveway, I met Andrea. So
Andrea being your wife.
Andrea being my wife. So taking a job that ended up being a scam in a different country without the guarantees that they said I would get, ultimately leaving that job but wanting to stay in Toronto. The reason I wanted to stay in Toronto was because I had already met her, and so then it was. Plus, I wanted to hang out in a big city. I was sort of sick of, what I was doing, being unemployed. So I figured I could be unemployed in Toronto, doing odd jobs there. And so it was really good in some way that I didn't get the first job, because I got a chance to, meet my future wife and partner and start a family. But
You
there's no
must be
doubt
you
that
must be pretty smooth.
no, 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 I'm stubborn. Stubborn, yes. Smooth, no.
So how did it happen?
We just became friends.
Hmm.
Um, we she was next door neighbor, so we would sit up at night, watch the people go by on the busy street and streetcars, and drink tea, listen to music, and just got talking. My roommate and myself, and her roommate and her, and then friendship turned into more than that. That was just it was good to be friends. And truthfully, I was really more focused on the work, because that's why I was there, right? I was solely focused on that. And then after a while, when I realized that the job wasn't legitimate, that okay, I've got a decision to make. Let's see if I can find a job up here, and see what the friendship becomes. And that was the decision to make. And thankfully, she went on that journey with me early, and I did find a job with an American company up there for a while. Um, but it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. So then the decision was, where do we live? What do we do? How do we do it? And I wouldn't say it was a flip of a coin, but it was, do we stay in Ontario and I immigrate? I've got to not work for a year. Do we go back to the States and she immigrates and she doesn't work for 6 months? So the 6 months was less than the year, and that's pretty much why we did what we did. Uh,
Plus, you had your grandparents' farm, right, to
yeah, and
live
my,
on.
my that was huge. I mean, for my grandmother to offer that, wow, uh, that was a massive win. It was also really hard because we're used to downtown Toronto. I'm used to Manchester, New Hampshire. I'm used to Syracuse University, and we're on a dairy farm. And so it's complete isolation in lake effect snow. Really hard on Andrea at first, but it's over time got there, and what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and that certainly made us stronger.
So you were on the dairy farm for 3 years, you said?
3 years, saved up money, got my first job at the first TV station.
What was that like?
That was great.
The process of getting the job.
The process of getting the job was I really wish I remember more of it than I do now. The first interview I don't remember at all. Um, and actually, I remember a story about it, and that is that the local sales manager picked up his coffee cup and he said, sell me the coffee cup. And it's in the documentary about me now, because we went
Hmm.
back to interview him.
I'm
And
about halfway through the book. I have not seen the documentary.
documentary is good, mainly because I didn't do it, so that they did a good job of public broadcasting.
Hmm.
Um, when you're asked to sell somebody their coffee cup, uh, I'm very glad I said what I said, which was, what do you put in the coffee cup? And I made a point of, how do you like your coffee? And the reality is, people don't want a coffee cup. They want what's in it. They don't want the drill bit. They want the hole that it makes, right? And so you have to paint a picture. And I did that with this person. And so I had a second interview. And like every second interview, I was waiting to hear no. And then I got a phone call, would I come in a third time? And the third time was a difference. That's the first time I had a third interview in person. And the local sales manager said to me, I want to offer you a job, but there's some conditions, because, quite frankly, they don't want you to sue us if it doesn't work out. And, much like the high school experience, you're starting your experience with a condition. The condition was that, I would get a trial period with no existing sales territory, but I could, sell advertising, and I'd make a commission off what I sold. And thank goodness I did. I had $17,000 in new business advertising sales my first month.
Holy cow.
I was the number one new business salesperson for the first full year in 1995. When I got the job, I wasn't going to fail because I was unemployed for 4 years, right? I finally got what I wanted.
How did you do it?
Do which part of it?
How did you make so many sales in a month? That's crazy. And then beyond that,
I picked up the phone.
Hmm.
That job that I took in Ontario that was an American company. It was telemarketing, magazine sales, and so I had to make 50 calls a day that were documented.
How did you do that? Did you do it with your left
Yeah,
hand or?
yeah. I would.
Mhm.
They gave me a headset, and so I would just hang up and dial, and then you had to handwrite notes. So I had to handwrite every note on a sheet of paper. Um, but that job in Toronto really taught me the importance of the numbers.
Mm,
If you make 50 calls, you're going to have 2 sales, right?
mm.
And so that really kind of, I drilled it into my head. And then when I got to Channel 3, it was, hey, if I make more calls than my peers, I'm going to have more meetings. If I have more meetings, people are going to remember me, and if people remember me, I'm going to get sales. And it really did work. It you know it
Was it mostly over the phone or did you go see people?
I would make the call. I would make the calls to go see people. At the time in the early 90s, people were still just going out and walking into businesses and advertising sales. That doesn't work. You you want to lose a sale fast, walk into a busy furniture store and try to talk to a general manager. They're never going to see you, but they will remember that you interrupted them. But if you have a
Mm.
10-15 meeting on a Tuesday, they'll give you time. So that was a difference, and that really helped me begin. And then that ratings information that I had in my head from all those years in college, I became the ratings go-to person for the other salespeople.
Mm.
So that created value for me within the organization. And so that those two things, simultaneously made me money early on in my young career. So we got to leave the farmhouse, we got to buy our own house and start that process, and that was really, really a good thing.
No knowledge is wasted knowledge, right?
That's right. That's
So
right.
I heard an interesting cold call idea a while back, and the person said um, that he would stop in at businesses, meaning cold call in person. Stop in at businesses, go to the receptionist, and say, "I know the owner doesn't have time to see me now, but would it be okay if I leave my business card and follow up with a phone call at a later date?" And invariably, they would say, "Yeah, that's fine." And then he would follow up with a phone call with some success. I thought that was like a nice derivative of, just a cold call,
Yeah,
and having someone hate you because you didn't make an appointment.
it's such a good way to do it. I mean, I think, at the time you had to figure out a way to differentiate yourself from somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the 90s, either that's making more phone calls or being good on the phone. Being good on the phone is underrated. Um, and then,
What does it take to be good on the phone?
well, I think you have to be knowledgeable about who they are to some degree, but I think more than anything, you need to listen. So you better ask a really good first or second question, and then listen to the answer and pivot off the answer. I mean, I think that is so so essential. So I think about some of the conversations I've had over the years in sales organizations and scripts and bullet points. That always bothered me because if I'm going down that path, am I really truly listening? And we all get telemarketing calls. And if you fall for one and you start answering the questions, they're on their script, and that you play the game in reverse. But be able to be able to ask a question and hear the answer, that's
Mm.
it's a true gift.
I feel like when salespeople call me, like they never ask me a question. Like or it's debated, like you were saying, there's a series of questions and they're the spider and you're the fly.
Yeah,
They're just trying to wrap you up.
it's true.
Um, I've gotten really good at saying, I don't have even a minute to talk about this. I'm terribly sorry.
Yeah, and I think that's another part of it. If you're kind but firm, you can get out of that, and that is, because I think the other people on the other end hear the humanity in it. That's important too, right? I mean, we don't have time. I don't have time to go on a 10-minute phone call with somebody unless I've instigated it and I want to do it. But we invariably get it. But I guess there's the rare moment where you listen to somebody in our stage in life now. But the way we do business now is different too. It's not the same as it was in 1994.
So I feel like everyone's in sales, no matter who you are. You're selling an idea, a concept, you're persuasive in some way. It doesn't matter if it's at your house with your family or at work or with your friend group. If you want to influence outcomes, you're selling as subtly as you may be subtle, but you're
Yep.
somehow persuading. And I feel like in order for that to happen, the other people have to be willing to allow you to persuade them. And there's certain techniques you can do, but mostly it has to do with trust. So I feel like in my case, I always say, I'm guessing you're not interested in what I'm selling. I happen to be a financial planner. I say, I'm assuming you're not looking for a financial planner. I'm a friend of John Robinson's, and he has a high opinion of you. I'm a financial planner, but I'm assuming you're not looking for a financial planner. And what do they do when I say that?
Yeah, they'll either tell you yes or no. Maybe
Well,
I
they always say, yeah, you're right. I mean, 1 out of 100, maybe they say, I am looking for somebody. But
am.
usually they're like, no, I'm all set. And I say, fine, John said you were super organized and probably wouldn't need me. Um, but I wondered if it would be permissible to send you an email just explaining myself and maybe have permission to follow up in the future. You just never know what the future holds. And most reasonable people are like, you're right. I don't know what the future holds. So now I've told them that my perception is they don't need me. The pressure comes down. And then I ask permission to follow up to explain myself. And they say yes. And then I write a real letter, 3 paragraphs, nothing crazy, just what my background is. And then I follow up with a phone call. And again, say, I'm not assuming anything has changed, but I wondered if I could tell you a little bit about myself in addition to the email. And most people are like, okay. And it's kind of like the Scheherazade, it's the story that never ends.
Yeah.
And before you know it, you're having a conversation. And I just feel like everyone that's trying to sell me stuff today, with a few exceptions, wants to do it right now. And it reminds me of, I was talking to years ago, the people that solicit funds for Union College. And the president at the time was Roger Hull. And the theory was if you're in front of people with money, you may never get back there. And my theory was the opposite. Like, I always just want to be welcome back because inevitably things are going to change and there's going to be an opportunity, but it's got to be on the other person's timetable because they're not interested in my timetable. So the problem was every time they were in front of a person with money, they're saying, we need $1 million or whatever the number is from you. And then the person would say no most of the time. And then you wouldn't really be invited back because the ambiance wasn't right. It was too soon. There wasn't the proper level of intimacy to do that ask. And my feeling is like if I have enough of those relationships where I'm invited back and I can go see people pretty much whenever I want, if I get permission, just say, John, are you busy next week? If not, or even if you are, could you fit me in for 20 minutes? Could we meet at Starbucks again or wherever's convenient for you? And if we have a friendship of sorts, you might say, yeah, I still don't need anything, but I enjoy our conversations. Like last night, I was in a conversation in Rochester, New York. We went to a fundraiser for the politician Morelli,
Yeah.
the Democrat. It was quite popular everywhere. And really just common sense politician from what I've gathered over the years. But this guy was close friends with him. He actually went to this guy's um, Morelli went to this guy's retirement party and gave him a proclamation, which was really sensitive. I thought that was awesome. But anyway, so we were at this thing last night and we get done and we have dinner together, me and this person. And I said, is there anything I can do for you? And he's like, no, I still don't need you. He's like, but I really like talking to you. We can do this anytime. And to me, that's what I want. Like, we're friends.
Yeah.
Like, whether he ever does business with me or not, the litmus test is not that he gives me money. It's that we're friends.
You if you think about what you did at the beginning or what you're doing at the beginning, you mentioned somebody referred you or somebody recommended the friendship, right? The number one advantage in advertising, other than babies in commercials, so take babies out of it. The number one victory is testimonial. And so when you call and say that so and so recommended, we speak, some version of that, you shed away some of the anxiety because you validated your place in a friendship or an acquaintanceship. And that's a huge win, a huge win. We all want to do business with people that we know. And if we don't know, we want to get to know, to be comfortable to do business. So by starting that as a referral from a friend, you've shed a lot of the anxiety, then taking away that I'm not here to sell you something today. Again, that alleviates it, but then that puts you on the track of creating a new friendship. And then people will want to do business with friends. I've thought a lot about this in my place and in life. Early on in the television world, when I was selling advertising, I got involved in Rotary. And Rotary tells you you're not there to do business, you're there to serve the community. But guess what happens? Everybody does business with everybody in the room. And so it's because you become friendly with each other and trust, and then you want to do business. That's exactly what you're describing in the way you go about what you're doing. It makes perfect sense. And that is a way to cut through the noise of today's universe. And I think it's a really, really good thing.
I feel like when I'm inner-directed, worried about my own things, whatever those things are, I'm completely ineffective.
Yeah, that's the big truism in sales. If you're worried about your number and your number alone, you'll never serve your client.
Mm-hmm.
Even just our ability incorporated. If I'm worried about the finances of it, I'm never going to get to where I want to get to.
Mm-hmm.
What I need to worry about is why I'm doing what I'm doing, which is, in our case, we're building employment for people with disabilities. If I can stay on that, then the business case follows. And that's really, really important for me to remember. It's not always easy. It just isn't. And I think back to the days selling advertising with budgets and running fundraising for public broadcasting and the commercial side of things. If you're worried about solely the number, you're not going to get there. But if you're mission driven and true to yourself and wanting to create relationships, you will get there, because people want to do business with people they like and trust.
So, do you do any hiking?
No. Heck no. No, my hand cycle is right next to my desk today. So I've got my hand cycle on a flywheel here in my office.
Gotcha.
I did. Andrea convinced me to go up Mount Joe in the Adirondacks a couple times. I did it once, and then the man that was going to be the director of the documentary about me asked me if I could do it again, and they could get it on camera. Wouldn't it be cool? That'd be the end of the movie. And Pat, I literally shook my head at him, and he worked for me, and I said, absolutely not. There's no way I'm going to do that again. And sure enough, 6 months later, we did it. Hiking is my wife's thing and my kids' thing, and I'm glad they do it. I'm proud that they all have that to share. It definitely made my children better children.
Mm.
It's a physical and more mental outlet for my wife. For me, it's just, it's really physically hard. Uh, but everything's physically hard. So then it's a
Mm.
reality of what do I want to do that I enjoy. I ended up enjoying hand cycling more than I thought, and crossed the Erie Canal 363-mile path 6 times. And I did that. I loved it, every minute of it, and it got bigger each year. And I really enjoy golfing. If you go back to your first question of my earliest memories, one of the earliest memories was, playing Little League Baseball in Green, and then being told by my father that I wasn't welcome to play there anymore. And that same moment when he told me that, he had a left-handed, thank God he had a left-handed club. He realized I was lefty. He had a left-handed 7-iron and a left-handed putter, and he cut him down, regripped him, and he said, "Nobody will ever take this away from you."
Mm.
And it's true. I played golf since I was 8 years old.
That's incredible.
So Andrea's got her hiking. The kids got their hiking. Andrea's got her running. God bless anybody that has a passion. For me, golf is my thing right now, and I'm enjoying it while I can swing a golf club, meaning while my back is okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to take as much as I can in doing that. And in my 50s, without young kids, you know what? I can do it.
Do you know what the most important punctuation is in the English language?
No.
In my opinion, it's the hyphen. Do you
Okay.
know why?
Why?
Because it's between your date of birth and your date of death.
True.
So it represents your entire life in a way. If we were talking to someone, I don't know, 50 years, 100 years from now, and you weren't here to tell them about yourself, what would you want them to know?
I think that answer, Pat, for me is sort of twofold. The truth is, I'm disabled. I'm visibly obvious disabled. At the beginning of whatever's written about me post life, that's going to be the headline. And that's good and bad. There's no doubt it's part of my story. I hope it doesn't completely define me while I'm alive, but the very truth is that will be the first sentence. So whatever version of Wikipedia there is in 100 years from now, inside our eyeglasses and wired into our brain by Elon Musk, yeah, that's going to be there.
Mm.
The other thing about that is I am not as driven to leave a legacy as some people get at this age. My legacy, I hope, is in my children and their lives. That's what I want, and the friendships that I've created. I built a company to help people with disabilities. I don't know what that's going to end up being. I know that what I've done is good for now, and someday it'll get bigger, and it'll get bigger because of somebody else takes hold of it and runs with the idea. Good. That's the way it should be. It was never called John Robinson Incorporated on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
If it's my friends' children talking about me and not the future Wikipedia, I hope what they say is he was a good person. He was fun to be around. He was stubborn and but also a really good friend. That's what I'd like. That would make me smile. I am not by any stretch a perfect person, Pat.
Mm.
I got my issues. I've got my foibles. I've got my problems in life. But I do want to be liked by the people that I want to be liked by, friendships, and that matters to me. That'll be the second paragraph that's written, and that's okay because I know it, and that's okay. If you think about it in another way, in 100 years from now, we'll be engineering our children before they're born. There will be very little disability. It just will. Unless it's acquired, unless it's an amputation, in a car accident or whatever flying car we're in. The truth is, it won't be all four limbs. It could be sepsis, but probably sepsis will be fixed. So
You believe that? Those bacteria are very resourceful.
they're getting resourceful.
I wouldn't count them out.
Yeah, let's put it this way. I hope it's fixed, because acquiring a quadruple amputation has to be extremely daunting. But yeah, I do think in most cases, 100 years from now, disability won't look the same. And so what will be written about me is, in some ways, what's written about the circus people in the late 1800s. I get it. I hope the second paragraph is a more testament to who I am internally, because that would make me smile.
I feel like the first paragraph should be a testament to the sum total of your relationships.
Hope so.
And then the second paragraph, they can say all that you overcame physiologically. Because I think to leave that out wouldn't be fair.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I'm skeptical.
We're on record saying this is your preference, so everyone knows.
That's right. When people watch this in 21-25, yeah, we're on record. Go look it up.
Well, your kids hopefully will watch it.
Yeah.
Right.
Hopefully.
Is there anything that we're leaving out? Anything you might like to ask me or say before we wrap up?
I love the in-depth process that you go through. In this world of 15-second sound bites on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and YouTube, it's nice to have a conversation and go down a path. That's kind of neat. That's life, right? That's the way life should be. Just like you would have over coffee. And I think that's a lost art. So it's great. And I enjoyed watching what I've watched, and it was really easy for me to say yes to this, because I knew we would go down this path for a period of time.
Thank you. So I got one of my favorite people, as I may have told you, is the owner of the Cock and Bull restaurant out in Galway.
Yep.
Have you ever been there?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's really beautiful. We'll have to go. But his name is Rick Sleeper, and he likes to listen to the podcast, always in his truck. And he does it on the drive from Galway to Schoharie, where he goes to buy vegetables for the restaurant. And he says, I don't like to listen to it any other time, because I know it's going to be around an hour, and I don't want to break it up. I don't want to have to stop and then not listen to it for a couple days or whatever, and then pick up where I left off. So that was a really nice, I don't know if he meant it as a compliment or not, but I appreciated the fact that, like you, he looked forward to the sort of longish form. It's not a Joe Rogan 3-hour interview, but right around an hour typically, I find you can have a great, meaningful conversation.
Yeah, I found myself sitting here doing my paperwork and listening, and I don't need to watch the whole thing, but I certainly can listen to it, and you do get a sense of who somebody is, way better than you would in a 15-second snippet. And that is, again, it's a lost art, and that's it. Hopefully it comes back. I've got my fear, but it's great to have it in this format right now, so we should enjoy it.
Amen. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to seeing you again soon.
You will. Thank you, Pat, very much.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye. If you enjoy the most fascinating podcast in the world, please follow on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, and follow on Apple Podcast.